The jet hummed steadily beneath a soft chorus of murmuring passengers and clinking coffee cups. Warm daylight streamed through the small oval windows, glinting off polished brass and beige leather seats. The faint scent of roasted coffee and expensive perfume drifted through the cabin, pleasant until it was cut short by the sharp rise of an angry voice. "Are you serious right now? You're sitting in my seat." Heads turned. In seat 2A, an elderly woman with soft white hair and a pale gray cardigan looked up, startled but composed. Her name was Barbara Reynolds, 80 years old, dignified, and the kind of person who still mailed letters by hand. She blinked behind thin spectacles, her tone polite yet firm. "I believe this is my seat, dear. Toise, it's printed right here." The boarding pass trembled slightly in her hand. Towering over her was a younger woman, blonde, sharp-featured, and dressed in a blue and green checkered dress. Her name was Nancy Cooper, though everything about her radiated classic Karen energy. She snatched the ticket from Barbara's hand, glanced at it, and tossed it back into her lap. "This is ridiculous," Nancy said, her voice rising. "Maybe you can't read anymore." "That's my seat. You probably got confused. Senior moment or something." Across the aisle, a man looked up from his phone, calm but watchful. Andrew Mitchell, 38, had the patient look of someone who knew when a line was being crossed. He was Barbara's son-in-law, flying with her for support on a short family trip. His jaw tightened as he took in the scene. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "she's showing you her boarding pass. Maybe check yours again." Nancy whipped around. "Excuse me? Are you her lawyer or something? Because I don't recall asking for commentary from the peanut gallery." Andrew drew a slow breath through his nose. Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably, trying not to watch but unable to look away. A flight attendant approached carefully, her professional smile trembling at the edges. "Ladies, please, let's resolve this calmly. I paid for seat 2A, Nancy snapped. "Now this woman's pretending it's hers. I won't sit next to her. She's being difficult." Barbara's hands folded tightly in her lap, but her voice stayed low and steady. "I assure you, young lady, I have no interest in pretending. This is the seat I was assigned." The attendant checked both tickets. After a tense pause, she spoke softly. "Mrs. Reynolds is correct, ma'am. Seat 2A belongs to her. Your ticket is for 2B, the seat beside her." The color in Nancy's face deepened, matching the frustration radiating off her. "I specifically requested an aisle seat away from disruptions," she barked. Andrew muttered under his breath, "You're the disruption." Nancy's head snapped toward him. "What did you just say?" "I said," Andrew replied coolly, "you're out of line." Nancy laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Typical. To offend the elderly like it makes you a hero. Newsflash, I'm not the villain here. I'm a paying customer who deserves respect." Barbara turned toward the window, refusing to meet her glare. A faint tremor passed through her fingers, but her words were calm. "Some people confuse volume with authority." "What's that supposed to mean?" Nancy snapped. "It means," Andrew said evenly, "you might want to lower your voice." The flight attendant stepped in again, trying to diffuse the moment. "Please, let's all take our seats. We're about to taxi." Nancy huffed but dropped into seat 2B beside Barbara, crossing her arms like a sulking child. The air between them thickened. Every few seconds, Nancy muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable. Shouldn't even be flying. Probably doesn't know how seat numbers work." Andrew watched silently, counting to 10, then 20, then 50. As the plane began to roll forward, Nancy pressed the call button. The chime echoed through the cabin. The flight attendant returned, visibly strained. "Yes, ma'am." "I want to file a complaint," Nancy declared loudly. "This flight is already a disaster. The seating is wrong, the service is slow, and frankly, I don't feel safe sitting next to her." Barbara looked at her, eyes steady but cold. "I assure you, dear, I'm perfectly harmless, and that's what they all say before they—" Nancy stopped mid-sentence when she caught Andrew's glare. "Whatever," she muttered. "I want to speak to whoever's in charge." Barbara tilted her head slightly, studying the woman beside her. There was no anger in her face, only something distant, almost pitying. "You know," she said quietly, "I've met your type before. Always certain the world owes you more than anyone else." Nancy rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Save the wisdom quotes for your grandkids." "I intend to," Barbara replied calmly. Then she opened her purse, her movements slow and deliberate. The contents shimmered under the cabin lights. A neat wallet, a small notebook, and an old flip phone, a relic among the sleek smartphones surrounding her. Andrew frowned. Barbara, she smiled faintly. It's all right, dear. I just need to make a quick call, Nancy scoffed. A call during taxi? That's illegal, sweetheart. Unless you're phoning the retirement home to tell them you've wandered off. Barbara didn't react. Her thumb pressed a single button. One ring, two. Then a familiar voice came through, warm, confident, unmistakably close. Hey, Mom. You all settled in? Andrew blinked. Mom? Barbara's lips curved slightly. Almost. But there's been a bit of unpleasantness in the cabin. Nancy snorted. Oh, for heaven's sake. Who is that, your imaginary friend? The older woman met her gaze for the first time, calm but with a quiet steel behind her eyes. No, dear, she said evenly. That's my son. Your son? Nancy repeated, incredulous. And what's he going to do, talk me to death? Barbara paused, letting the low hum of the engines fill the silence. Then she spoke clearly without a hint of drama. He's the pilot. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Andrew's eyes widened slightly. The flight attendant froze mid-step. Nancy's smirk faltered, though she tried to cover it with a forced laugh. Oh, sure he is, she said, her voice too loud, too nervous. You're telling me the guy flying this plane is your son? Cute story. On the other end, the voice replied gently, Everything okay back there, Mom? Barbara's tone softened. It will be soon, darling. Just wanted to let you know I'm aboard safely. Nancy's expression flickered, first disbelief, then unease. Her eyes darted toward the cockpit door as if the truth might somehow leak through the metal. Around them, passengers began whispering quietly, trading glances filled with new curiosity. Andrew leaned closer, his voice low. You never told me your son was a pilot. Barbara's eyes sparkled in the glow from the window. You never asked, she said simply. Nancy folded her arms tighter, staring straight ahead. For the first time since boarding, she said nothing. Barbara closed her phone and placed it gently back in her purse. Her composure was unshaken, her silence steady and full of quiet strength. The engines roared as the jet prepared for takeoff. Andrew could feel it too, a subtle shift in the air. The balance of power had changed. As the plane lifted into the sky, Nancy's fingers tightened around the armrest. She stared out the window, her earlier confidence draining away like air from a leaking tire. Barbara leaned back, eyes closed, the faintest smile touching her lips. Above the hum of the engines, Andrew whispered, What did you just do? Barbara opened her eyes, serene and unbothered. Sometimes, Andrew, she said softly, you only need one call to change everything. The seatbelt sign chimed. Nancy sat rigid, jaw clenched, unaware that her biggest shock was still ahead. The plane leveled smoothly above the clouds, sunlight spilling across the cabin like liquid gold. The earlier tension had faded, leaving behind a heavy silence. Nancy sat stiffly, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin, defiant line. The hum of the engines filled the air, broken only by the soft, rhythmic click of Barbara's knitting needles, a sound that seemed to mock the younger woman's restless fidgeting. Andrew tried to focus on the magazine in his lap, but his eyes kept drifting toward the two women. Barbara's calm was unshakable. She hadn't spoken a word since that single decisive phone call. Nancy, meanwhile, looked like a shaken soda can ready to burst, muttering every few minutes about ridiculous old people and phony stories about pilots. The flight attendant approached, tray balanced carefully in her hands. Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed a hint of caution. Can I offer you something to drink? She asked. I'll take champagne, Nancy said quickly, forcing a smile. The expensive kind if you have it. Barbara lifted her eyes from her knitting. Water will be fine for me. Thank you. Andrew declined politely, though he noticed the subtle change in the attendant's tone. She glanced at Barbara with quiet respect before hurrying back down the aisle. Something had shifted, an invisible current of deference or perhaps unease. He couldn't tell which. Nancy noticed it too. What's with the special treatment? She snapped. She looked at you like you're some kind of celebrity. Barbara's needles paused for the briefest moment. Maybe she's just well-mannered, she replied softly. Or maybe she knows you're making up stories, Nancy shot back. Your son's the pilot, please. What's next, you own the airline? Andrew turned toward her, his voice calm but firm. You might want to stop talking while you're ahead. Nancy smirked. Ahead? You mean before your fairy tale mother-in-law gets me banned from air travel? She leaned closer, lowering her voice but not her hostility. You both act like you're better than everyone. Let me guess. You're one of those people who think politeness makes you morally superior. Barbara looked up, her expression unreadable. No, she said, but it makes life quieter. Nancy laughed, a hollow, humorless sound. You're something else, lady. A chime interrupted her. The captain's voice filled the cabin, warm, calm, and unmistakable. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We're cruising comfortably at 35,000 feet, and I'd like to take a moment to personally welcome a very special passenger on board today. My mother, Mrs. Barbara Reynolds. The cabin rippled with soft surprise. Heads turned and whispers spread like sparks through the rows. Barbara kept her eyes down, still knitting, the faintest smile touching her lips. Andrew's eyebrows lifted. He actually did it, he murmured. Nancy froze, her confidence unraveling. Wait, what? The captain continued, his tone full of gentle pride. It's not every day I get to fly with my mom, so please join me in making her flight as comfortable as possible. Thank you for choosing our airline. The intercom clicked off. A quiet wave of applause followed. Nancy's face turned crimson. You've got to be kidding me, she whispered. He's actually your son? Barbara didn't look at her. That's what I said. Nancy shifted, trying to recover. So what? That doesn't give you the right to... To what? Barbara asked gently. Expect basic respect? The flight attendant returned, placing a glass of water before Barbara and champagne before Nancy. This time, her smile toward the older woman was warm and genuine. If you need anything, Mrs. Reynolds, please don't hesitate to ask. Nancy nearly choked on her drink. Mrs. Reynolds? The attendant nodded politely. Yes, ma'am. The captain's mother. Nancy swallowed hard, her cheeks burning. Oh, right, of course. I didn't realize. Barbara resumed knitting, the quiet rhythm of the needles filling the air. Andrew bit back a grin. The next half hour passed in uneasy silence. Nancy tried to act unfazed, scrolling through her phone with jittery fingers, muttering under her breath about overreactions and coincidences. The arrogance had drained from her, replaced by a restless tension she couldn't hide. When the attendant passed again, she spoke softly into her headset. Moments later, the captain's voice returned, this time directed at one passenger. To the lady in seat 2B, I understand there was some confusion earlier. My crew informs me everything has been clarified. I trust the rest of the flight will be peaceful. A few passengers chuckled quietly. Nancy's face went pale. He's talking about me, she hissed. Andrew raised an eyebrow. Pretty sure he is. I'm being humiliated, she whispered, voice shaking. This is completely unprofessional. Barbara said nothing. Her calm remained absolute, a quiet defiance that made Nancy's unraveling even more visible. Finally, Nancy turned to her. You think this is funny, don't you? You and your perfect manners. You think you've won? Barbara placed her knitting down and met Nancy's eyes. No, she said softly. I don't think of life as winning or losing. But I do believe in consequences, Nancy scoffed, clinging to the last of her pride. Consequences for what? For telling the truth? For mistaking cruelty for honesty, Barbara replied. The words landed with quiet precision. Nancy's mouth opened, but no words came out. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. Around them, the cabin fell silent again, as if the plane itself was listening. Andrew leaned back, watching with quiet admiration. Barbara hadn't raised her voice once, yet she commanded every inch of the space around her. Her calm wasn't weakness, it was strength refined and deliberate. The flight attendant appeared once more, placing a small plate of cookies beside Barbara. Compliments of the cockpit, ma'am. Nancy's jaw tightened. Unbelievable, Nancy muttered under her breath. Favoritism in the skies. Barbara turned slightly, her voice calm but firm. You should try one, she said, nodding toward the cookies. They're quite good for calming the nerves. Nancy didn't answer. She sat stiffly, fingers gripping the armrest, her earlier confidence reduced to brittle silence. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, the sun dipping toward the horizon in a wash of amber light. Inside, the air hummed with quiet tension, a stillness that felt heavy and alive. Andrew sensed it completely now. The cabin's energy had shifted. Without a word, everyone seemed to align with Barbara. Respect and silent and certain had been restored. The seatbelt sign blinked on. Moments later, the captain's voice returned, calm but tinged with warmth. "We'll be descending shortly. And Mom, don't forget to grab the cookies before you go. They're your favorite." A soft wave of laughter rippled through the cabin. Barbara smiled faintly, her eyes filled with quiet pride. Nancy stared ahead, unmoving. Her voice, when it finally came, was small and uncertain. "He really is your son?" Barbara nodded once. "That's right." Nancy exhaled, shoulders slumping. "I didn't mean to. Well, maybe I did. But I didn't know." Barbara looked out the window, her tone even but edged with meaning. That's the trouble with people who shout first. They rarely stop to learn who they're shouting at. The plane began its slow descent, engines humming softly. To Nancy, every minute felt endless. Sweat gathered at her temple as she avoided every passing glance. The laughter from earlier echoed faintly in her ears, a reminder of how quickly arrogance turns to regret. She folded her arms tightly, clinging to what little pride she had left. Barbara sat serene beside her, knitting now tucked neatly into her bag. Her composure was unshakable, graceful, powerful in its calm. Across the aisle, Andrew met her gaze and offered a faint smile, one of gratitude and quiet admiration. Nancy tapped her fingers against the armrest, restless. "I'm going to talk to your son," she muttered. "He can't just humiliate passengers like that." Barbara didn't look at her. "If you feel wronged," she said gently, "you should speak to him. I'm sure he'd be happy to clarify." Her tone was even, but something in her calmness told Nancy that doing so might only make things worse. Still, pride refused to let her stay silent. She straightened her back, jaw tight. She wasn't used to being embarrassed. She was used to winning. Below, city lights shimmered like scattered jewels as the plane broke through the clouds. The captain's voice came over the intercom once more, warm and composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing in approximately 10 minutes. Cabin crew, please prepare for arrival." Nancy drew a slow breath and whispered to herself, "He won't dare say anything. He's a professional." Barbara tilted her head slightly. "He's a man of principle," she replied softly. "That's different." The plane touched down smoothly, rolling to a gentle stop. Seatbelts clicked, bags shifted, and passengers began to gather their things. But before anyone could stand fully, the intercom crackled again. "Passengers, please remain seated until we reach the gate," came the captain's calm voice. "Additionally, I'd like to speak privately with a passenger seated in 2B before disembarkation." A heavy silence fell. Heads turned. Nancy froze, her heart pounding in her chest. "He means someone else," she whispered, though no one believed it. The flight attendant appeared, her expression polite but firm. "Ms. Cooper," she said evenly, "the captain has asked that you remain seated until the other passengers have exited." Nancy's throat went dry. "What, why? I didn't do anything." "Please remain seated," the attendant repeated, tone final. Andrew stood, helping Barbara with her bag. As he leaned closer to Nancy, his voice dropped to a low murmur. "You might want to hear what he has to say before you dig that hole any deeper." Nancy glared at him but said nothing. The cabin filled with the soft shuffle of passengers gathering their belongings, sneaking glances her way. Some pitied her. Others smirked knowingly. When the last traveler stepped off, the cabin door opened. A tall man in a crisp uniform entered, posture relaxed, gaze sharp and commanding. "Good afternoon, Miss Cooper," Captain Reynolds said evenly. "I understand there was an incident before takeoff." Nancy's voice trembled. It was just a misunderstanding. I thought your mother had taken my seat, and maybe I got a little upset." "I've reviewed the cabin recording," the captain said, his tone polite but edged with steel. "This aircraft is equipped with audio for safety. Your words were clear. You insulted, belittled, and verbally harassed a fellow passenger, my mother." Nancy's mouth opened, then closed again. "I didn't know who she was," she stammered. "You shouldn't have needed to," he replied evenly. The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Barbara sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady. Andrew stood beside her, calm and unwavering. Nancy tried to recover her composure. "Look, I'm sorry. I overreacted, all right? It's been a long day, stress, bad morning, you know how it is." The captain nodded slowly. "We all have bad days, Miss Cooper. The difference is how we treat people during them." He took a measured step closer, his voice low but firm. "You're fortunate this was a private charter on a commercial aircraft. On a regular flight, your behavior could have resulted in immediate removal and a report to the passenger conduct database. Nancy's face drained of color. "You can't be serious." "I'm afraid I am," he said. Then, gesturing toward his mother, he added, "You owe her a sincere apology." Nancy hesitated, trembling between pride and fear. But the weight of the moment left her with no escape. She turned toward Barbara, voice quivering. "I'm sorry for shouting, for being rude." Barbara's eyes lingered on her, unflinching. The silence stretched until Nancy began to squirm. Then Barbara gave a small nod. Apology accepted. The captain straightened, his tone all business again. "Thank you, Miss Cooper. You'll be escorted to the terminal on the next shuttle. Your return flight has been reassigned to economy. The airline has been notified of your conduct." Nancy's composure cracked. "Downgraded?" "You can't, I can," he said simply. "And I have." Her voice rose, desperate now. "You people think you can humiliate me over one mistake." Barbara stood, her movement graceful but commanding. "No, dear," she said calmly. "You humiliated yourself. We simply stopped pretending not to notice." Nancy's jaw trembled. No words came. The captain gave her one last level look before turning to his mother. "Ready to go, Mom?" Barbara smiled warmly. "Always." Andrew stepped forward, lifting her carry-on. Together, they walked toward the exit as the attendant opened the door. Sunlight spilled into the cabin, bright, clean, and unforgiving. Behind them, Nancy sat frozen, tears stinging her eyes. She fumbled for her phone, desperate for control. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed an angry post, something to reclaim her pride. But as she hit post, her phone buzzed. Notifications flooded in. The story had already spread. Someone on the flight had filmed everything. The clip was everywhere. Plane karma was trending. Her breath hitched as she watched her own face on screen, angry, distorted by entitlement. Her shrill words echoed from the tiny speaker, impossible to deny. The internet didn't need context. It had already judged. Meanwhile, at the foot of the stairs, Barbara paused beside her son and Andrew. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel and rain. "Quite the flight," Andrew said quietly. Barbara chuckled. "It's funny. You can fly 30,000 feet in the air and still find yourself grounded by people's behavior." Captain Reynolds smiled faintly. "You handled it better than I ever could." She patted his arm. "Age teaches patience. But sometimes patience needs a little help from altitude." Andrew laughed softly, then turned thoughtful. "You really showed her what grace looks like." Barbara's eyes glimmered in the sunlight. "Grace isn't about letting people walk over you," she said. "It's about knowing when to stand." They walked together toward the terminal, leaving the open door and the chaos behind. Inside the plane, Nancy sat alone. From outside, faint applause drifted in, the ground crew greeting the captain and his mother. She stared at her phone, at the endless flood of comments, mocking, condemning, rejoicing in poetic justice. Her fingers hovered over the screen, then fell still. For the first time all day, she said nothing. Out on the tarmac, Barbara turned once more to glance at the jet gleaming in the light. There was no triumph in her face and only calm certainty. "Sometimes," she murmured to Andrew, "you don't need to raise your voice. The truth does it for you."